What's going on, gamers? So I'm back. No, I haven't been here for a while, and I have a good explanation for that. But now's not the time, so let's make a tier list. This is Season 4, Calamity, and let's go from bottom to top. So C tier, worst character in the entire game. Toga. I tried to make him work. It doesn't seem possible, unless you play really gimmicky with the Claw Koga, but I don't think he's ever worth it. Next up, Talus, another terrible character. He has limited options. He's easy to bully. He's easy to CC currently, especially in this meta. And I think he struggles against double heals for that reason as well. Next worst is Vivian. Vivian, I feel like she doesn't really do anything and her skill ceiling is pretty low. She gets spammed out and I don't really think it's worth playing her. That's it for the C tier, the not worth playing tier. Next up is B tier. And I'm going to start this one off by saying Io is my least favorite healer right now. She got a lot of nerfs and her dog doesn't really do as much anymore. I feel like she doesn't have the damage to do a double support comp either. So I don't see the use of her so far. And that brings us to Torvald. Torvald also got a lot of nerfs recently. I think he's a little underrated. I've seen some Torvalds work. There's a couple good ones, not a whole lot of them. Shield health is really low and I think he's just kind of fallen out. Next we have Moji. Moji's actually pretty good on a couple maps, but I feel like most of the maps, she just doesn't work out. She doesn't have the range and she got a lot of nerfs over time. So you don't really see it working out too much. It's mostly a gimmick or maybe very situational on a couple maps. Next we have Sky. I actually think Sky's a little underrated. I mean, I don't want to play her, but she does get countered by any reveal and any flanker that wants to bully her, like Eevee, Vor, Xin, all strong picks right now and all kind of destroy Sky. She might work as a secondary healer, but I view it as kind of a gimmick. I think it belongs in this lower tier. Next up is Lex. Lex is pretty nuts on console, but we're talking about PC. I don't see the point of playing him. He's kind of situational as like a flank counter. I think he fits in the triple deeps sometimes. I think he's playable. Personally, I'd say he's one of the weaker ones. Now we have Strix. I do think Strix is probably a little bit worse than Lex. His rate of fire nerf was crazy. You don't get the same picks you used to with the double tap, and you don't get the same duels wins that you used to either. Feels very weak. There's almost no point of picking him, and I tried playing him. It's just super frustrating with how bad he's gotten. Bomb King, kind of in a similar boat as Strix. Kind of think he gets hurt more by the current status of the servers. He's just unreliable in design philosophy and like actual execution. He gets a lot of counters like range, flying characters. A lot of maps aren't too good for him. There's a lot of big maps in rotation right now. I just think he's kind of weak. Couple that with the nerfs. I was trying to play him as like an accelerant build, but it's still pretty bad. And we got another blaster, Willow. Willow has potential. She has a few really good maps. She's playable, but she has also got a lot of counters. Long range hit scan and probably throwing a Drogue or Andy in there too, which are both pretty strong right now, I'd say. Willow kind of counter, but she can carry if picked in the right situation later in the draft. Dredge, kind of a similar situation as Willow. All the blasters are kind of chilling. Dredge doesn't really have cauterize and he's kind of map dependent. I was kind of hyping him up before, but it kind of lost of his appeal to me with the lack of caught. Still viable though. That's it for B. Now let's go to A-, which are pretty strong picks, but maybe slightly weaker than the solid picks or slightly countered. For instance, Shaolin. So I actually think Shaolin's really strong, and I might be biased because I'm kind of a Shaolin main. He gets countered by Tyra, Vivian, Cassie reveals. Reveals don't do so great for him, and he's not amazing at countering long range stuff. It's kind of hard to pull off. You can bait yourself into picking him sometimes, but I think sometimes he is actually really strong. Just overall, a tiny bit weak. Kind of goes for Drogo's too, another polarizing pick. So Drogue can be strong, but he can also be pretty weak. He's not an early pick champion, just like Shaolin. When he gets countered, it's rough. When he's free, it's awesome though. I do like Drogue. Probably the best blaster right now. Brings me to Victor. So I don't think Vic pops off as much as he used to. I actually find it kind of hard to make him work. It doesn't feel the same as it used to with the less life rip and less damage fall off, less DPS. I'm not really liking it too much. I've seen it work a couple times situationally, but I think there are better options. Speaking of better options, we have Maeve. So my main issue with Maeve right now is she does not feel good with how jumps don't work sometimes. Although I would put her A if her jumps were solid. No jumps, and that's a little tough into Andro and Leon. I think Maeve deserves an A- spot for that. She does have potential though, if she can jump. And I'll put Pip up here as well. I actually think Pip's underrated, both as a healer and as a DPS. I think he's very strong. He can work out in most situations. He does get countered by flying and headshots. It's playable and he's got a really high skill ceilings. He might be an A. I'll have to see what I think later. And I'll put Kinessa up here as well. So she's not usually an early pick. She is strong on sniper maps and she's weak on non-sniper maps. She's just kind of floating here. If you're a Kinessa one trick, I think you can make it work almost all the time. It's a little bit risky and you can get punished by triple deeps or hard dive. You don't have to worry about a Strix counter sniper as much as you used to. Ruckus A-. So I actually think Ruckus is nuts. He's my favorite tank and I think he's got a really high skill ceiling. He's one of the best designed tanks, but there are some maps he just doesn't work, like Frog Isle. It's just too hard to make him work sometimes. Big game is rough to go into. Bows are generally rough to go into. He can get bullied, though he's a little situational unless it's his like really good map. Ashe right next to Ruckus. I actually think Ashe is a little bit weaker than Ruckus right now because she gets punished more by stuns. She doesn't have 3 dashes like Ruckus. She only has 1 and it's quite a long CD, so she can get bullied by all the stuns in the game right now. I don't think she's working out that well. So A- from me. Rom's kind of in that boat as well. More polarizing than Ashe. He gets punished even harder by stuns, but if there are no stuns, he does really well. Kind of a risky pick. I wouldn't pick it early. That's why I don't think it's A or higher, and I think it's kind of hard to find a spot for him unless you really know what you're doing. And let's put our point tank Inara there too. So she kind of got bullied by nerfs, and I think there's better options. I don't think she's a strong point tank with her lower DR. There are a lot of good point tanks right now, and Inara isn't one of them in my opinion. And let's get Ying an A-2. So Ying kind of has the same thing she always has. She doesn't have utility and her movement's a little bit hard to figure out. I think there's better options and I don't think Ying does well into double heal. Like all she brings is heals to the table. So there's no utility, there's no damage, there's no like playmaking ults. It's just heals, and I think you're better off with something else. And I'd like to add Genos to that. Now Genos doesn't really have much of a damage boost, and that was kind of half the point of picking him. I still think he's underrated for triple deeps though. He can work for that, but I would rate Corvus a teeny bit higher for a situation like that. Oh, I almost forgot Buck. So Buck I think is a little underrated. He's a good dueler and he punishes certain things well, and he boxes tanks really well. He doesn't have the range, but he does counter stuff. Sometimes I find him not doing as much. Like he doesn't take the game and run away with it if there's not enough space. I find a little bit underrated, I think. Now to the A tier, which is solid picks. You can pick them early, you can pick them almost whenever you want. They're just solid all around. And a great example of that is Cassie. Cassie's always been, to me, the jack of all trades, useful for anything, not countered by anything, does especially well into certain things. Lots of viable ways to play her, just very, very flexible and well-designed character. She definitely belongs in A. I'm going to keep her from S because I think there's a couple better damages out there right now. That's coming from me, a primary Cassie main. So Tyra's really strong. I think some people don't notice, but she's really, really hard to duel. She's got a lot of sustain, a lot of damage reduction. Those marks are crazy annoying, especially if you're playing Shaolin. The ult's kind of bad, and she doesn't have a whole lot of range, but she can do well in just about any situation, I think. And this might surprise some people, but I'm gonna put Amani up there. So I've been playing Amani recently. I mean, she's got insane CC, a cool ult that sometimes works out. She's a little buggy, but I can look past it because of her just raw power. Her rotations are great. Her duels are actually pretty decent too, and she just nukes stuff sometimes. Like she can nuke stuff if she has her cooldowns up. Takes a bit of getting used to as she plays a little bit different, but I think she's underrated right now. I'll put Evie in here as well. So she's pretty difficult to pull off. She can get bullied by stuff like Leon and Sha, but if you match the high skill ceiling, you're going to have a really good game on her, even if you pick her early, I think. But you don't have to because nobody really takes it anyway. Reluctantly, Vora's an A. So I don't completely understand Vora. She gets a lot of hype. She gets a little bit of hate. I just find it really hard to win on Vora. She can't like nuke stuff the way I want to be able to. I think she has potential and there can be some exploration in her playstyle. And she has good sustain, she's got a cripple, so she can bully tanks well. She's got a great ult for duels and just playmaking, great mobility, great skill ceiling. A lot of options with your mobility. So she's the one I'm most unsure about. And we'll slide Xin up to A. A lot of people think he is S tier worthy. I'm not really seeing it. It might be because I'm more of a mechanics player than a cooldown player, but I mean, he's solid. You can pick him early and he's good on a lot of maps. He's got a couple weaker maps. I wouldn't suggest doing that. I mean, he struggles with high ground unless he has his ult. Struggles with range sometimes until he gets his Yomi strike out. He's got great executes. Just a solid pick, but I don't think it's S tier worthy. Our first healer for A tier is Furia. So I think Furia's busted. I think she's great into double support. Exterminate is just crazy. If you have a Furia double support comp into an aggro tank, kind of think you just win. Or if you have Furia with Yagoroth, I kind of think you just win. I think Furia is really polarizing in the current meta. So might be a surprise to some, but we got Grok up here. Same as Furia. I think he pops off on certain things. He's got a couple bad maps. I wouldn't pick him ever on Timbermill, but he's got some great maps and double support is just so good. A team ult that makes plays, got good poke, good sustain. He's actually okay at dueling sometimes, depending on how you play his position. But he really swings fights with those bounces. This is damage Grok, by the way. You don't main heal on Grok. And Koa for A. About what you'd expect. I think I was a little overhyped on him in the past. I thought he was S tier maybe a month ago, but a solid A. He's got some weak maps. He's got some strong maps. He's got some counters that he doesn't really like. He doesn't like getting headshot. He doesn't like percentage-based damages. He's solid, but he's difficult to play, and there's some really strong tanks that are above him currently. So A tier for him. And we got Terminus. I actually think Terminus is a little bit better. But Koa does get good hooks on Term. Term is like easy to play, hard to punish. He actually counters some stuff. He's got a couple amazing maps like Ice Mines. And Term is just so good. I hate playing in the Terminus. It's my least favorite tank to play into. It's crazy. And then we got Fernando. So I actually think Fernando's a little bit difficult to play because I don't see that many great Fernandos, but I'm pretty sure he's kind of good. Some would put him at S. I'm gonna hold off on that. I don't really see him being used to his full potential. The ult is really difficult to pull off, but he's got an amazing shield that is so frustrating to try to break through when the Fernando's playing okay. We got a healer Damba. Some people think he's the best healer. I actually think he's pretty good. He's up there, but not the best. He's always been solid. Good ult, good heals, good board, a lot of decisions to make. Very well designed character, but kind of difficult. I would actually prefer my support playing something easier if it's like a mid-elo game, but a good Damba will do a lot. And this is the support I prefer most of the time in most elos. Saris gets away with a lot, and I actually think she needs a nerf because her movement is so good with Fade to Black and Veil. She is so hard to kill. I don't think you can kill her. She pumps out heals. Her ult's kind of nuts if they don't have shields to stop it. She can get away with a lot, and some maps have pretty good spam angles. Personally, I think she works as a secondary heal as well. I actually think she's an okay damage with Agony. I don't see it too much, but I actually think it's pretty good. And then we got Corvus for the final A tier support. Maybe a tiny bit underrated or underpicked. I still think he's really good. I think he meshes with triple deeps and blinks a little bit better than the others. So that's what I would pick him for. And for our S tiers, we got Leon for the damage. I actually think Leon is really, really good. Better than Cassie, especially if you take a wide open map like Frozen Guard or Timber. I think she gets a lot done, and her counters aren't as scary anymore. Like Ashe and Ruckus aren't as scary as they used to be, and if she's worried about it, she can just go Alacrity, which is viable now. So she has two viable playstyles with Sniping Eminence and Alacrity mid or close range aggression. So I think that flexibility and just her raw damage and makes her really good. And then we got Andro for S. I've been told to put him in A, but I'm an Andro main, and just his damage, his duels, and his options and his skill ceiling, his ult, just everything about him is insane. There's a caveat with him. I do think he gets shut down by Buck and Tiberius a bit more than other flankers. Tiberius, Leon, I do think he struggles a tiny bit, but I think it's still worth to put him in S because of how much he changes the game. Speaking of Tiberius is nuts. He's just so good with that 1k plus burst, the spam. He's like the best dueler in the game if he's got his cooldowns going. His shuriken spam, his ult to go in and chase or to leave is okay, but his sustain is insane. He's just a tanky tiger, man. He's nuts. And a bit early on the draw, I'm gonna say Octavia's S tier. I think she's gonna be really good. I actually don't like playing her in her current state. I think she's got way too much screen shake and way too much inaccuracy with her hip fire. So personally, I don't really like it, but I can see her ult is really good. Her damage output is really good. Her range. I think she's gonna have a pretty good skill ceiling with her smoke-like opaque dome. She's got a lot of potential when explored, and I think she's gonna need a little bit of a nerf when she reaches live servers. And the tank Barrick. So Barrick, he's a tanky dwarf. His changes were kind of nuts. He's gonna get a nerf soon, so kind of deserved. He just does so much. He sustains like crazy. He's got pretty good damage. He gets headshots. Good ult. Pretty good skill ceiling because he has some mobility options and a couple cooldowns to manage and turret positionings. And he's about in line with Khan. So originally I thought Barrick was better than Khan. I can see an argument for maybe depending on the map or depending on the point tank options or the comp, because Khan is just insane with his ult and his damage output, and he can just roam by himself or can buddy up really well with the DPS on the off lane. So currently I think Khan is the best off tank. I wouldn't really put him on point like you would in previous patches, but that's just because he just does so well as an off tank, and his ult is pretty much an execute if you can hit it. So around there is Atlas, and Atlas has a crazy skill ceiling, and when he's played well, it's so annoying to play against. 99% of the players I don't think can play him to his potential, so it's probably worth picking a different tank. But if you get a good player on Atlas, man, you just can't let him have it. The rewinds, the damage, even the ult in a good player's hands just disrupts a lot. Seems like it's almost impossible to kill if someone's managing their cooldowns the right way. And I actually think Grover is the best healer a lot of the times. He's probably the only healer you can pick early and not get punished on like Ice Mines, Jag, Bright Marsh. I think is really good. His cripple punishes flanks, it punishes off tanks. I mean, Grover is kind of nuts, dude. He can get picks, he can make plays. His ult's solid too. Great mobility, good skill ceiling. Grover, I think, is the best support. And that leaves the best character in the game, Yaggorath. So she's incredibly overtuned right now. This character is not fair at all. The team with the most Yag support currently wins, and that is a terrible video game to play. She needs to be more incentivized to go on the off lane and less incentivized to go on point. In this patch, a Yag on point with sufficient healing, the Yag doesn't really have to do anything but vomit everywhere and win the game. So I hope she gets her nerfs coming to her, because she's not my favorite thing. And that's everyone. So let me know what you think, what you hated, what you agreed with, and how badly you want to nerf Yaggorath. See you in the next one.